Act your age, not your shoe size. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwall with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke, who is a much better singer than I am. And now on to our topic. Act your age. Okay, so hopefully you're old enough to get the joke about the title of this video. Not only was it something we said to each other growing up in the 80s as a cracked, hey, act your age, but it was also the lyrics from a Prince song, or a Tom Jones song, depending on who you preferred listening to. But what are we talking about? Well, there's a couple ways we could approach this video title for our purposes. But the core of this video is to illuminate the different behaviors and emotions that come with the different phases of life, and how we can use that information when we're doing our script analysis for a character that requires us to stretch our age range. It should be said up front, however, that the majority of the time, especially in TV and film, you will essentially be playing your age, give or take a couple years. Though some actors like Michael J. Fox always seem to be playing characters 10 or more years younger than their actual age. As a side note for theater, there is often more leeway in casting for theater. So you may play a character who is 10 years, 15 years your junior or your senior. It's just that in the TV and film world, the moment you step on screen, you need to be believable as the character you're playing. Okay, but here's the thing. Even if you don't look a decade younger or older than your actual age, there are occasions where you might be expected to embody a character who does have a different age or maturity level than you. For instance, you might be playing a character that is shown at different stages of their life in the same project. Case in point, the show This Is Us, specifically the actress Mandy Moore, whose character was shown at different decades in her life in every episode. What about playing an immortal character like a vampire? You might be 20 years old for real, but what if the vampire is 700 years old? Or do you remember the show Third Rock from the Sun? Joseph Gordon-Levitt was the youngest main cast member, and yet his character was the leader of their alien group. And so there's this implication that his character was actually the most mature or the oldest or certainly the most powerful. Or what about body swapping comedies like Big or Freaky Friday? Or Freaky, which features my beautiful wife, Brooke. Ding again. Twice in one episode. Or The Change-Up, which features a cameo by yours truly. Although that one's not a good example because it's just two dudes who are the same age swapping bodies. Anyway, you get the point. There are quite a few instances where you might be asked to audition or play a character that has a substantially different age than yours. So, as an actor, how do we explore those different decades of life in our prep? And you might be saying, Matt, isn't it intuitive, especially if I'm playing a character younger than me, because I've lived that? I know what it's like to be 6 or 16. Sure, but the problem is with things that are intuitive, we rely on them as feelings. I want to bring specificity to the topic so that it brings it to your conscious mind. That is much more useful when you're doing script analysis and character analysis. Let's start by talking about that phase of life from birth to about puberty. In this phase, we're really not aware of how we affect the world around us. In fact, we're very selfish in this phase. And we haven't learned how to judge ourselves, which also means we're really bad liars. Think about it. Kids don't have that self-awareness to know how to hide their feelings or hide the truth. Thus, you have the pee-pee dance when a child has to go to the bathroom, or the wild, erratic physicality that happens when they get a sugar high, or that lack of understanding when it comes to the difference between an outside voice and an inside voice. Make sense? Then something weird happens when puberty sets in. Your mom or dad might hand you that book, What's Happening to My Body? And you start to become hyper aware of you and how you are fitting into this fabric of society. And it's at this point that you become aware of the thing or things that make you stand out. And so you start to try to dull those edges so that you can fit into either the entire society around you, or maybe just to that niche group of friends that you have found. This is where kids who experience a growth spurt might develop a slouch so that they don't seem to be so tall in relation to everyone else. The rich kids might try to downplay their wealth by dressing like a commoner. On the flip side, if you grew up poor, you might have tried to dress above your station, so to speak. In short, this time of life, which is roughly somewhere in middle school through high school, brings a lot of insecurity with it. Sometimes that insecurity is worn right on the sleeve, and for those at the top of the social hierarchy, they do a good job of hiding it. Those kids were really good at masking their insecurity with confidence. And I put that in air quotes because every kid in this age range is insecure about something. That's why in TV and film, the jock or the queen bee who gets their comeuppance at the end of the story, it's usually because they finally are faced with their own insecurities. So after high school, we either join the military, go to college, get a job, maybe do some traveling, or live at home with the parents for an indefinite amount of time. Whatever happens, hopefully our version of the world starts to expand. We encounter more people, we get new and bigger and better ideas about this thing called life. And because we're being exposed to new people and new situations, we develop this ability to modulate our personality in those different situations. So the Matt that goes to a frat party on a Friday night in college isn't the same Matt who shows up to church on Sunday with the parents. So essentially, when we're in our 20s, we're quick to develop and assume new personalities based on the needs of the given circumstance. Then something happens in our 20s into our 30s and beyond, which is we start to rein it in. It starts to become too much work to modulate our personality. We don't want to become all things to all people anymore. So we find that core version of ourselves and we start to sort of bring in those extremes and we sort of park it there for the rest of our lives. That's why someone like me in my mid-40s can easily age up 10 years or even down 10 years if I color in these grays, because the core of who I am is not going to change that much in these passing decades. What largely will change is maybe my physicality. As the cartilage disappears between my vertebrae, which is already happening, it might slow me down, it might change my posture, and so forth. And that slowing down or change in physicality or posture will continue into my 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. So with that brief breakdown of the human experience over many decades, how can we use that information to inform our performance? Well, if you're in your mid-40s like me, and in the story, you're really an 8-year-old trapped in a 45-year-old person's body, then I think about that added energy that an 8-year-old has, the inability to really control some of their physicality. They also don't really know how to modulate their voice a lot, so they just stick in this monotone range, and maybe there's an upward inflection at the end of every sentence, and they just keep talking because maybe they had a pixie stick before this conversation. An 8-year-old doesn't know how to use their voice fully to get complex thoughts and emotions across. Or on the flip side, they don't know how to hide those emotions through voice modulation and other physical means. An 8-year-old is also going to be more vulnerable because they don't know it's wrong to be vulnerable. The world hasn't taught them that yet. Now, let's say that I'm playing a teenager trapped in a 45-year-old body. Maybe it's the classic father-son body swap. Well, now I'm going to try to tap into the insecurity that pervades those teen years, where I'm hypersensitive of what people think of me or how I'm coming across to the audience that I'm in front of. And if my character is being aggressive, then I would want to tap into that sense of false hubris because I don't want it to come across as the 45-year-old version of Matt who is intimidating. I'd want there to be a sense of innocence and a sense of facade that comes along with that anger or that intimidation, because that 14-year-old version of Matt wasn't that confident about his abilities to intimidate the world around him. For a character in their 20s, I'm kind of doing that in the videos on this channel. If you were to interact with me in real life, you would realize how much more low-key I am in person. On these videos, I need to be more engaging, so I'm tapping into that 20s version of myself who tried to heighten different sides of his personality depending on the audience. And since my audience is the internet, I'm leaning into this 20s version of me, essentially. Now, if I was playing somebody in my 30s, there's not that much of a difference between that and my 40s. I'd rely more on the makeup or the wardrobe, those elements to convey that difference, and maybe find a middle ground between the energy and the sort of exaggeration of certain qualities in my 20s and where I am in my 40s. And to play someone older, I would just continue to soften some of those elements of myself. I would allow my voice to continue to rest more deeply into my chest. I might slow my speech down. I would be aware of erratic head movements or other physical movements, because once you get into your 50s and your 60s, unless you stay healthy, unless you stay active, well, things slow down. Okay, so that was some quick and dirty tips on how to think about the different decades of our lives, so that if you are tasked with the very fun challenge of playing a character who lives somewhere else than where you are in your current life, you have at least a general roadmap of how to approach those character traits. And in the case of something very fictional, like a 700-year-old vampire that is trapped in a 25-year-old body, have fun. You can exaggerate some of these ideas and discover your own ideas, because that doesn't exist in reality. So the world is your oyster in terms of creating that character. Have fun exploring. So now I turn it over to you. Have you had the chance to play or at least audition for a character that was substantially different from your current age? If so, what sort of tips and tools did you use that you could share in a comment below that got you to that place where you felt like you were really embodying the character? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set